Okay.
Okay, Sharon. Hi, good morning. Let me introduce you first. I'm doing a series of interviews with the wonderful women who put our tours together for us. And we're very fortunate that we have mainly women that do this because they know what we like. And actually, Sharon, I remember the very first tour I did to India, you did a little shopping tour for us at the beginning, like a little extra add-on. So I know that you do get us and our needs. So Sharon owns Ekno Travels and tours in India, Australia, Japan, Bhutan, Nepal. They go to lots of places. And we've worked together, I think, for quite a while now, maybe 6 years or 5 years or something like that.
Something like that. Mm-hmm.
So Sharon lived in India for quite a long period of time. And I'm going to ask you, Sharon, if you can tell us a little bit about what drew you to India and also maybe how you sort of got the concept to start your business and then what drew you back home again, because, you know, things change over a lifespan. So welcome. Hello. Tell
Hi.
us a bit.
Okay, so I went to India for the second time in 2001, and I went there because I had an interest in Buddhism, and the Dalai Lama really, the place of Dharamsala kind of really drew me in. And I'd already been there in, I think, 96, because I'd already always loved the idea of the Taj Mahal. And, I think I was really good at geography and history and won prizes at school. So, I was always kind of probably meant to be for distant lands. So fast forward in 2001, I decided to throw it all in, give up my corporate job, rent my house out, and eventually sold it, and went to Nepal for I think about 6 months. And then my sister came over and we went to India because I wanted to go to see the Dalai Lama with the idea of maybe teaching English there, doing some volunteer work.
Mm-hmm.
So in 2001 or 2, I went to this place called McLeod and stayed in a little guest house and just totally fell in love with it. The trees, the mountains. We actually got a private audience with the Dalai Lama.
It's stunning. It's a stunning place. Yeah, I love it too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I thought, this is where I need to come. This is the place of my dreams. Not good old tropical Brisbane, but beautiful, beautiful Dharamsala. And I think it was May, so it was a little bit hot. But, I'd always heard about hill stations. So I think I stayed there, my sister and I stayed there for a couple of weeks. And then I thought, something told me I had to come back. So I kind of went to Southeast Asia for 6 months, but always thought that I would go back. So I think in 2002, I went back and did some volunteer work like I thought I would, and loved it so much, and made a fatal mistake of meeting a man and a local man, and thought, oh, I'm destined to be here. I'm so destined to be. So I did, So I kind of followed my dreams. I did go to Japan in 2003, and while I was away, I pined for him something badly, and I can't imagine why now, sitting here in 2020. But anyhow, we all make these mistakes, don't we? So I went back and did some volunteer work and loved it. And so then I went to, as I said, back to Japan. I went to Japan and then came back in 2004, because I was offered a job at the same school. So I went back there, thought my whole luck had changed, got a job as a director of studies, totally unqualified for it, but anyhow, beggars can't be choosers, I guess, for them. But I had done my ESL training, and then I went to, the man owned a hotel, so he owned a hotel. So kind of talked me into kind of buying into the hotel in between my teaching and all that kind of stuff. So I left the teaching job and bought into his hotel and then set up a restaurant. So, that was kind of ticking along very nicely in 2004 and 2005. I worked very hard to have this restaurant. And then I started to have Australians that came. And so one day there was a guy, Australian, who's still in business from Melbourne, who had a group of women, 8 women. And he was kind of off, and they were all fighting amongst themselves. They were on a 21-day tour. And so they were really fighting, like they were, bitching about each other and couldn't stand each other. And they still had another 2 weeks to go. And they were saying, well, what are we going to do? I can't stand her and I can't. So I found myself in the middle of this group counseling everybody, So I was counseling them all, saying, it'll be all right, it'll be all right. So when the leader came back, I said to him, gee, you've got a few problems with your group. What are you going to do about them? He said, what are you talking about? What's wrong with them? I was like, well, mate, they're really struggling with each other.
Not
happy.
Oh,
yeah, they'll be right. He said, they'll be right. And I thought to myself, well, if he can do it, I can do it. So that was kind of what started. That's how it started, was this group of women who were all fighting. And I thought, well, I'm kind of in tune with what goes on. Yeah. And I don't know that running a restaurant charging $1 for a Thai curry was going to kind of sustain me forever. So I thought tours was the way. And I've been a lifelong traveller, like all over the world as a backpacker for years and years and years, all that kind of stuff. So that was kind of how it started. And so once it's kind of started, I ran with it.
So you've owned your business now and you've grown your business now, and I saw you just launch your new office space, and you've got a couple of great guides that we use, Vikas and Ashish. How critical has it been to the success of your business to have good local people to work with?
Totally essential. I think you can't do it without them. You cannot do it without them. And I think I have been lucky. I was lucky because I had this man who was kind of very well connected, and he was a bit of a businessman. So we thought. He wasn't really, but he knew all the processes. So I sort of started with him, and then when that all kind of went pear-shaped, then there was another friend of mine who runs a big NGO, ABBA, you probably know. She helped me also. So I think, and then I was able to take on a couple of local young men, to train them up. So really, you have to have local people, because otherwise you're like an outsider looking in. And, there are so many nuances, particularly about developing countries, that you know nothing about. You don't know how it works. So you've got to have a local person on the ground who you can trust. And so when my partner, when he, went by the way, well, I had Abba, and she, she's very well connected. So, you need people that are well connected, to find things like a good accountant to advise you on tax rules and all that kind of stuff. And so I'm eternally grateful for her, because what I have been able to do is set the foundations for a business in India. I'd already had them in Australia, but to have them in India, so it can't be kind of pulled down really quickly, you've got to have, and as my lovely accountant, his name is Mr. Sharda in Delhi, he said, madam, if you have your fundamentals all in place, then you can carry on. Everything will be okay. And through Corona, how true is that, because, we can.
That's a very Indian type of wisdom that gets shared with you often when you're traveling around India. So you've owned your business for many years now, and you've decided to return back to the sunny state of Queensland to live. And fortunately, we have the internet now, and, which you wouldn't have had so much when you first started your business. But so you're able to run your business now from Australia, and that's still ticking along for you.
Sure.
I know that we've got unusual circumstances at the moment, but you're still running your business. So what was it that drew you home and made you realise it was your time in India had come to an end?
I've kind of done a lot of soul searching about this, but I think it can be a culmination of many things. It can be a series of events. It can be that you get to a certain age, and your sort of body clock tells you that you can no longer sit on planes, you can no longer sit in traffic for hours, all those kind of things that a travel guide and also you yearn for your own people in a way, and I think a lot of people stay in other countries like Westerners because they're married, so they are sort of in a way the outsiders on the inside, whereas I think once I didn't have a partner there, I was kind of really on my own. So I think it was like turning 60 that suddenly everything started to change, and I had this really big urge to come home. And it wasn't, in a way it started before then, but it took me like about 5 years of thinking about it. I mean, oh no, three. I started in 2015, and I actually sort of made a bit of a run for it in 2018. But I think it's only in 2020 now that I feel settled and I'm not yearning for this other place.
Yeah.
But I think, so I don't think it's one thing. I think it's many things, and also, all my old relatives started to die, and I could never, so when you were living abroad, you don't kind of connect. You connect to that community, but you kind of lose a lot of connection to your own community. Like you miss your your nieces and nephews' 21st. All your old uncles and aunts. They've been all dying. So that's what I kind of missed. I was always somewhere else.
Yeah.
Even the birth of my sister's baby, I wasn't there. And I just sort of thought, I think you get to a point and you go, enough.
So you've come home now, and I'm just wondering whether there's any lessons, or like your life has changed irrecoverably from your time in India, and also I know you have a strong connection to Buddhism and a range of things. I'm sorry, I'm going a bit dark here. I'm not sure why the lights are still on, but I think you can see me. So you've come home, and I'm wondering, have you brought a piece of India with you? Is there things in do you make chai every morning? Like, is there anything you've brought back with you to your Australian life that's, are you sticking a spoon of ghee in all your cooking, or have you given rice up altogether, or anything you brought home with you from India that you just is part of your daily practice?
I'd have to say no, except yoga. I try and do yoga, and of course meditation. I really like to do those things in the morning. As far as food and chai goes, no, not at all. But I guess what I'm doing now is writing a series of travel memories, thinking about all the funny things that have happened, documenting them. Unfortunately, I still have 2 dogs there, and they can't come here, so I sort of look at them, and my heart sort of skips a beat, because I've had one since he was a puppy, but he's well loved in with a family now, who so I still keep, and all that kind of stuff. What have I brought back? Well, I've got photos on the wall, and I've got wall rugs, and I guess it'll be part of me, and I can kind of slip in and out of talking to the guys, and I guess, with our connection of the internet, you still communicate with your Indian friends and all that sort of stuff. So I feel that ease will always be there, there'll never be a barrier, because I feel like, having lived with an Indian man for 7 years, I'm able to get into the kind of the psyche of it. So I feel like I kind of know them well, but also a part of me also is very Australian, so I can't deny that either. So I think, the main factor really was an age thing, and missing out and also living in another country like India is exhausting. like I used to come back here like for 3 or 4 months a year, but the first month I was so exhausted that everything would just kind of wash over me, and so it is exhausting because you're up against so many, rules, regulations, all that kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
And I think once you make that decision, but I also felt that things had started to go wrong, like a little bit wrong. I had and I haven't written about this, but I kind of had, incidents with 3 incidences with goats, like running over goats and people blackmailing me over goats and all that. And I think that was kind of the thing that said, because I lived in an Indian village, that said, I think it's time to get out of here, love. It's kind of not working. So I think you've got to listen to yourself. And I just decided that there were sort of things that, and I'd had a bit of a free run, after the Indian man. I'd had this lovely life, with servants and all this kind of stuff. Could go wherever I wanted and go to Delhi shopping and all that kind of stuff. But I think there was kind of a series of things that I started to pinpoint that, and yourself, when you start to grow unhappy, that it's time to change.
So when you write that story about the goats and the blackmailing, can you please share it so I can put it out in my newsletter, and also put a link to all your writing retreats that are coming up too, because I know that you organise and run retreats for people who want to do a bit of writing themselves. And I'll also share with you, when I've got time, my story about being blackmailed over a dog in Bali. So I've also, which I didn't kill, but I lost, sort of. I sort of lost it. It was kidnapped. I had to pay for it to be returned back to the villa I was staying at. It's just a drama. Hysterical, an hysterical drama. So before we finish up, I just wonder, have you just got any good tips for women travelling to India that will make their life a little bit easier? Because it is very different, even though it's becoming more and more modernised all the time, like everywhere. But just any good little tips you might have to make their travels a bit smoother?
Well, of course, number one is to go with someone that you trust, and I think it's always good to have a guide, even though that's my business. I'm not saying that, but I don't feel India is still a place that so much goes on in the surface, but so much more goes on at another level that we don't see. And while we think we know what goes on, we simply don't. We don't at all. So I think until you feel, until you have sort of some really strong connection, but to go with a guide, go with people that go with a travel company. And I think safety is important. And as we know through this pandemic, that safety is always, whether it's health, your health, or your physical safety. And I think for women, it's always, India is still a deeply patriarchal society. It's a little bit better now, but still, I think, they don't have the laws and, the surrounding, women aren't safe in Australia either sometimes, late at night and within homes and all that kind of stuff. So I think, you've got to kind of protect yourself. So, be curious, be curious, and don't be afraid of people, because Indians are very curious, and a lot of them travel abroad, but a lot of them don't, so be curious, ask answer their questions, and their basic question is always basically, which country are you from? So, after 15 years, I still would say Australia, rather than, sometimes it gets on your nerves. But I think they're basically very curious people. They've been shut in a way, a lot of them can't afford to travel, but they are curious, and they're intelligent people. So it's great just to interact with them, and interact with the chai seller or whoever. Just interact with people, because they're the memories that you're going to take away with you.
Absolutely. Everyone loves to have a chat, and that's something that's great about the tours that we run with Vibrant Women. I have to stop people sometimes. They're too interactive. The want to have a chat with everyone. We don't have time to chat to everyone. But I've had women stop and get haircuts on the side of the road for $1.20, you know, just in a chair on the side of the road. There's all sorts of stuff going on. So, but lots of people speak English in India, which is great for us. It's not the case in all countries. So we can communicate with people living there really easily. You're quite right. People are curious and friendly. I remember the first time someone asked me to hold their baby for a photo. I thought it was a scam. I thought they're not going to come back for this baby. And I always love it when I get home and I look through my photos and I see how photo bombed we've been. People want to be in your photos, you know. So they're just good fun, good laugh, and just so very generous and warm and welcoming. One of my favourite places to visit.
And keep your heart. Keep your heart open, you know, and, you know, there's some, you know, one thing that you know about Indians, if they're a bit older, they'll always be married. So ask them about their husband or their wife and their children. They love to talk about their children. So ask, you know, do you have sons or daughters? What are they studying? Because, you know, that's their proudest, that we work for our big monstrosity of houses, you know, they work for their children's education. So, you know, you can have a few little opening lines that can, you know, or you know, and really always their native place. Where were you born? You don't say where were you born. You say, where is your native place? So that kind of, those three small things can open the world, their world to you, you know, which is very important. And they love to hear about you too, you know, they love to hear about where you're from. And of course, cricket, that's you. For men, that's the universal language.
I know. Ricky Ponting is my darling.
Yeah, I know.
He's my darling. I said, what about Shane Warne? Not Shane Warne. This is a few years ago, mind you. Not Shane Warne. Ricky Ponting is my darling. So I don't know who the current flavour of the month is, but cricket always gets the conversation going.
Steve someone. Yeah. No, they, you know, because they study it all, you know, they study it, and that's their kind of sport. That's really the only sport.
I will tell you something. The women's cricket was on last time I was there, and my partner said before I left, I wonder if they watch the women's cricket in India. And I said, oh, I don't know, I'll ask them. And they said, well, just ask them if they know who the captain of the women's cricket team is, because that will give you an indication if they even care or if they know. So on the way, I'd been in Thailand, but I flew into Delhi, and on the way into the hotel at Delhi, I just asked the driver, oh, have you been watching the women's cricket? It was on at the time. Do you know who? He named every single person on the team.
There you go.
And all of the morning breakfast shows, because in the dining room where we had breakfast, there was a television. The women's cricket was on every morning. They interviewed every player. They had their background, their family, everything. It was really big news, so much more than Australia. So that was really lovely to see. So on that note, thank you for opening up our eyes to the world, which you've done, and, you know, opening our hearts and keeping us connected with this beautiful feeling that you get and experience through traveling. Thank you for providing such amazing support and tours for us at Vibrant Women. We couldn't do it without you. Your level of professionalism and attention to detail is excellent. So we look forward to continuing to work with you, and have a lovely weekend.
Thanks, Tammy, and we look forward to working with Vibrant Women again. So yes, from Shiv and Vikas and Ashish in India, and myself and Brooke also in Australia. So thanks again. Okay.
Right. Thanks, Sharon.
Take care. Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.